So Teray's on MSNBC. He's part of a show called The Cycle. He's one of the hosts. He's a really good guy, really smart guy. Look, I worked with him at MSNBC. I really respect his opinions. But I'm going to have to respectfully disagree with what's happening here. Look, Susan Rice is under a lot of fire from Republicans. And I respectfully disagree with a lot of liberals, progressives, Democrats on this issue. They say, wait, she got talking points from the intelligence community. She went out there on the talk show circuit 5 days after the Benghazi killings and said what everybody had at the time, which is, hey, wait a minute. It looks like some of these protests were in relationship to that video. You remember that anti-Muslim video that was out there, and that's why they had protests in Egypt as well. I don't really believe that. Now, there's a reason why I don't believe that. Number one, we found out later that it turns out the CIA actually did not say that. It got added later by a different part of the administration, and no one knows who in the administration added the talking point about the movie. The CIA initial intelligence report said it was a terrorist strike, okay? Now, look, you could still say, hey, wait a minute, it's not Susan Rice's fault. She's not the one who added it. She was just a spokesperson, went out on the talk shows and said things that she couldn't have known that it was any different, because by the time it got to her, that was the official stance of the government. I think that's a very fair point. But on those same shows, John McCain came out there and said, hey, you don't show up to a protest about a movie with rocket-propelled grenades. This was a coordinated assault. So he knew, and by the way, so did we. We did the same reporting and said, this is not just some random protest that got out of control. It was obviously a coordinated hit, and it was a terrorist strike. Now, I think the Obama administration, before an election, didn't want to call it a terrorist strike, because that would seem like, hey, wait, why were you unprepared for a terrorist strike? So this is a rare thing that I think Fox News and the Republicans are somewhat right on. But that's not why I bring up Teray's clip here. First, he disagrees with me. Let me show you that part. This is the simpler part.
In January, he'll be forced by term limits to leave the Senate Armed Forces Committee, which makes him one of the more powerful and visible senators. In Benghazi, he hoped he'd find the scandal that would embarrass Obama and allow the creation of a new committee that would investigate Benghazi, with him as its leader, lengthening his time as a top senator.
So that's Teray talking about Senator John McCain, who's been the most vocal critic of the administration, and Susan Rice. And in fact, they had a meeting with Susan Rice today, McCain, Lindsey Graham, and Kelly Ayotte, these Republican leaders, the war hawks. And he came out and all said the same talking points about how troubled they were, and they were very disturbed by what they heard, etc. So now look, as a political football, you heard my opinion on it. I think Democrats have a fair point when they say, hey, listen, she was just doing her job, and she didn't come up with the intelligence. She just reported it on the TV shows. Here's where I really disagree with Teray, when he makes it, in this case, about race. Let's watch.
He also gave us the horrible optics of he and Lindsey Graham as old white establishment folks wrongly and repeatedly attacking a much younger black woman moments after an election in which blacks and women went strongly blue. Looks like the GOP is already laying the foundation for losing in 2016. I leave it to you to decide how much of the tarring of Rice as incompetent and unqualified is about the myth of black inferiority and female inferiority, and how much is about McCain flailing at anyone within arm's reach, desperate for a dinghy, as he feels himself sinking, descending down the ladder of power, dropping toward irrelevance.
No, not buying it. Flat out no. And I'll tell you what, look, it's not that I don't get it. You know, yes, they attack Holder, they attack Susan Rice, they attack Obama. They don't attack Tim Geithner, etc. But look, Tim Geithner is a tool of the banks. It's not that he's white, it's that he's for the rich and powerful. So are there racial components in what the Republicans do in some of their political attacks? Of course. But in this case, I don't see how her being a woman and black have anything to do with it. I mean, so does it make her immune from attack? So can she say whatever she wants on TV, get things wrong, and then we go, oh, look at that, you're hitting a younger black woman. And by the way, couldn't you use that same rationale to say that you should never criticize Condoleezza Rice? Because many of the Democrats who criticized her were older white men, and she was a younger black woman. So why is there two different standards when there's a Democrat and a Republican? And look, for example, the best example of this was when President Obama nominated now Justice Sotomayor, right? And Rush Limbaugh's of the world came out and said, she's unqualified. But wait a minute, there was no reason to say that. She had excellent qualifications. She had gone to the best schools in the country, Princeton, etc., and had excelled at those schools. So when they called her unqualified, was there a racial component? Yes. In this case, I don't see a racial component at all. It could have been Susan Rice. It could have been anybody else. If they did that same talking point, the Republicans would have attacked, partly for political reasons and partly because I think they're right. So, look, you can't, at every time black Democrats are criticized, you can't turn around and say it's racial. And in fact, it makes people not believe you when you have a really good case to make. So I totally disagree with Touré and a lot of other people who are saying this line of attack against John McCain.